This right here is a top spec 12-inch Retina MacBook. The 2015 to 17 12-inch Retina MacBooks were a unique blip in the history of Apple laptops. The MacBook Pro was known for being a portable powerhouse, boasting real top-tier specs. The MacBook Air gave users a lighter, cheaper peek into macOS. The 12-inch MacBook wasn't cheap, and certainly wasn't powerful. It was very, very light, though. So what's it like to use one of these in 2024? The design is unique, and we'll get into that soon, but first, CPU. These MacBooks have lower power Intel M chips as standard, with the weakest base clock speed down at 1.1 GHz and boost at 2.4. The most powerful CPU launched on the 2017 model, a dual-core i7 clocking in at 1.4 to 3.6 GHz. All of these CPUs perform quite weakly in benchmarks, with real-world performance far from impressive. The Geekbench 6 score of this top spec model comes in at 963 single-core and 1721 multi-core. These scores resemble those of significantly older MacBooks. The 2011 15-inch scores above this thing, for example, in the multi-core test. There's a 6-year gap between the two, remember, so that's a bit unexpected. As far as real-world performance goes, I would call this an entry-level look into macOS. Tasks from reading and writing documents to editing small projects on iMovie, doable. Stuff like gaming past esports titles and multi-track media production, it will struggle with. Thermal performance is what you'd expect on a machine like this. The low power chips don't get super hot, but this varies depending on where you're using it. Bear in mind that the Retina 12-inch MacBooks do not come with internal fans. This isn't unheard of in Apple laptops, considering several MacBook Airs with M chips don't come with them these days, but Intel machines aren't exactly suited to having no fan cooling them down. If you do game or edit complex timelines on Intel MacBooks, I'd always recommend resting them on a desk, book, or hard surface for optimal airflow. But with this one, that's not really something you have to think about. Take that as you will, I suppose. Storage and memory on this thing are far from poor. You could get either 8 or 16 GB of RAM, albeit with DDR3 memory running at 1866 MHz on the later models, and 1600 on the earlier ones. Storage was either 256 or 512 GB of flash memory. The speeds were nothing to write home about, but kept well up with the storage on the Retina MacBooks before it. At this point I should say that the 12-inch Retina MacBook signified curtains for upgradeability in Apple laptops. The CPU, GPU, RAM, storage, and battery were all either soldered to the board or, in the case of the battery, strongly glued in place. This, unfortunately, was to be the way forward for Apple, as since 2015, repairability and upgradeability has flat out disappeared from their laptops. A couple of viewers have crucially pointed out that if you can't remove the storage drives from a laptop, you can't get at your data if the machine breaks. Using proprietary interfaces for SSDs, as Apple has since 2012, is a real pain, also. Adapters to read these on other computers are hard to find, and who wants to be buying another MacBook just to read data off a dead one? Moving on to graphics performance, much like the lack of internal fans on this thing, it won't blow you away. Like many small form factor laptops, the GPU on the Retina 12-inch comes integrated into the CPU. This means it shares power and space with the main processor, as well as memory. The iGPU is the Intel 615. You'll be able to play very light games such as Minecraft or perhaps Valorant and Overwatch at a push. Just don't expect desktop PC levels of performance. Playing through video edits in real time is fairly straightforward for the GPU at 1080p, in iMovie like I said, but anything more complex than that will just be a lot slower. Battery life on these machines is passable. You're not going to get a full day's use out of the 40 watt-hour battery inside. It's not near M1 level, but for an Intel Mac, not so bad. It was rated at release for up to 10 hours wireless web browsing, but after 5 years of macOS updates, as well as a handful of battery cycles, I'd optimistically say 6 hours is more conceivable. A common problem with buying old and used MacBooks is that they often get left dead in drawers when the owners stop using them. Whether this is just before they go up for sale or years earlier, it doesn't really matter. Leaving any lithium battery completely dead for extended periods of time diminishes its capability of holding a decent charge. What you've got to remember about these laptops is they're incredibly thin and light. You're obviously not going to get some massive battery fitted in here. It's understandably a laptop with light processing power to fit the light battery and form factor. Back to that design. The 12-inch Retina MacBook series all had aluminium bodies that were only 13mm thick at their thickest point. That's almost exactly half an inch. Size considered, these laptops weighed just 2 pounds or 920 grams. The physical design of these things is something not much seen in the laptop world, even today. It's remarkable heat wasn't more of a problem actually, since there wasn't even a fan on board, but that does leave us wondering, what if Apple were to make an Apple Silicon laptop in this form factor? It certainly seems logical, and this is something fans of Apple have talked about a lot over the last few years. Whether that will happen remains to be seen. So a couple of other things worth noting. The keyboards on all 12-inch Retina MacBooks are of the infamous butterfly design. This was something Apple pushed as a breakthrough in the laptop world in order to make their machines thinner in 2015. The keys would travel less, leaving more room in the MacBooks for other components. The butterfly keyboards turned out to be among the least popular changes Apple made to their computer hardware in the last couple of decades, with countless instances of failed keyboards raining down upon the company, forcing them to issue a replacement program for a time. I had a 2015 Retina MacBook, and I can honestly say the keyboard wasn't as bad as people like to make out. I can absolutely see why they complained though. Writers, journalists, anyone whose occupation requires they write thousands of words each week will start to see problems with these keyboards sooner than your average user. I'm sure if I went back to that 2015 model now and tried to write scripts on it each week, I'd be in trouble fast. Apple improved the keyboard on the 2016-17 models with a Gen 2 butterfly layout. The owner of the on-screen machine told me that he didn't find the keyboard much of a problem. If you're not planning on writing a huge amount, I don't think you should be worrying too much. The other thing we haven't gone over is the meager port selection. Yep, aside from a 3.5mm audio jack, you just get one Type-C connector. That isn't a Thunderbolt port like on newer MacBooks, it's just Type-C, so unless your monitor supports Type-C connections, which is quite uncommon by the way, you're going to need to buy an adapter to plug this into a screen. Oh, and remember, if you want a hard drive plugged in, or a mouse, you can't charge the computer at the same time. Let's not take the piss here. One port is a joke on a laptop which cost over $1,000 initially. So overall, should you buy one of these? If you can find a great deal, yes. It's a really, really light laptop if that's what you're looking for. How long will it last? Well, it's impossible to tell, but all Intel machines are being phased out over the next couple of years. My next video is a timeline on how long each Intel Mac is going to last from this point onwards. Should be really interesting actually, so if it sounds like your cup of tea, consider subscribing so you don't miss it. As for this video, big thanks to Digital Guy for letting us have a look at his computer today. If you fancy contributing financially to the channel, my Patreon costs $3.99 and is linked in the description as usual. Thanks for watching.